Hello everyone, my name is Mubarak Ebemi and I'm offering tips from my practice. Well, I'm going to talk about business development. What really is business development? I've had a series of discussions with different people on what business development is from different areas and angles. For me, business development is a lot. It can be about public speaking, there's the endless networking, well, the sharing of business cards, if you want to look at it from that little way, creating a perfect brand. There are different levels to business development, but what we often overlook is that those little details, there are little details to business development that we often overlook. And one is when we take that simple request from a client, that request that we don't think it's such a big deal, and we just don't see the bigger picture. There's always a bigger picture to everything. Let me give you a good example. A client comes to you, for instance, normally, let's say a founder, study in that tech space because that's where you see founders really. Well, a founder comes to you and he says he wants to set up a company. We take that literally, most of us. In that situation, we just ask, okay, set up company, limited, we go ahead, issue invoice, set it up. That's what 70% or even 80% of us do. But there's that 20-30% of us that probably will ask a question and say, why a company? That kind of triggers new lines of questioning, even for that client. It begins to think, okay, what do you mean? And it kind of sort of spurs this strategy session between client and lawyer, where by the time you have explained the different angles of and modalities of institutions, corporate institutions, and how they work, he realizes that even a company or using limited companies by shares is not what he really wants, and maybe it's even just a business name. Yes, that might seem small, the pay might be little, but what we might end up doing is that we've been able to impose in that client that trust. He begins to see us as something more than just a simple service provider of a particular angle of business or even a particular area of law. This is where it gets very interesting. Most law firms would even just stop there. You register the company, email the client a certificate and say good luck. Throw that particular client in the wild. 10 years down the line, he wants to do his annual returns because probably he's beginning to get bigger investors. He wants to stay compliant. And then he's frantically calling you asking, what are annual returns? What does he need to do? You can see his company is not active. You can see the bits, and then you have to start explaining. Or maybe he goes to another lawyer and then that lawyer has to put him through. What you've done is that you've missed that angle of business. And this is what I mean by overextending the brief sometimes, opening that new line of business. Imagine if you had decided and gone taking a different approach. You send the clients that you email him the certificate and you go with a cover note. Your regulatory journey starts here, which means that obviously, yes, you've achieved by registering the company, but then you've been able to open a new line of business by telling him that it obviously has other regulatory hurdles to scale, which obviously in reality is true. And so you've transformed yourself from a service provider to a partner. That single action you took is both your professional duty and sometimes even the most powerful business development move you can make. Because when clients need that, they need to go through that hurdle or going through a regulatory bottleneck, who do you think they would trust? Is it that firm that issued them just an invoice? Or is it the firm that created or that showed them a map of how to go through it and help them and even guide them through that map? Obviously, it is the latter. And that is why it's important that sometimes we don't overlook these little things, because they might be as important as that big gesture that I spoke about in the beginning. Thank you for listening.